Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners. Here we are again, another Saturday show with Stephen, and it's the 13th of February already, almost halfway through the first quarter. Steve, welcome again, my friends.
Good morning to you, Chris. How are you?
Good. Looking nice and bright there.
Good.
Yeah, it looks lovely there.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much. Not so bad yourself. It's actually we've got a terrible thunderstorm right now. It's sort of that mid-afternoon storm, although it's a bit late, 5 o'clock today. It's been touching 40 degrees here the last week, so it's 37, 38, 39. It's pretty hot and sweaty.
Yeah, and you're looking good there, my friend, in the old cricket shirt, eh? Good result.
Well, there's no cricket today, but there's some rugby later today. I understand. I think we've got England Italy a little bit later on, which I'll be watching. Of course, just for Terry Ramage, I must shout out that I might also watch Scotland Wales, but it's a little bit late for me. It's a 1 a.m. kickoff here, so just not to sort of discount my Scottish roots for you, Terry. I'll still be there vicariously.
Yeah, and Terry Fair.
With my eyes closed in bed.
Yeah, the Scots did well last week. Great game, mate. Great game. They're on a good run now. I think that's going to be a great game against Wales. Oh, blimey, you really are flying the flag everywhere today, mate.
I was just taking a swig of tea there. Yeah. Apologies.
Well, listen, on the flag.
I'm quite looking forward to the Ireland France tomorrow, Chris. I think that'll be
that'll be a corker.
You double hat as an Irishman as well.
That's it.
On occasion, don't you? So that'll be a cracker of a game, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that. Listen, though, the fact that you got all the the Queen's Own links there. What do you think about old Grant Schnaps now with this? Everybody's looking forward to things getting better, and the numbers are coming down rapidly now, and the vaccinations going up. And then he comes out and says, you better be careful, no vacations and possibly no staycations even.
Well, I think Grant Shapps falls into that category that I've described before, that the Ministry of Transport portfolio is normally for duds and dead ends. So the Secretary of State, Mr. Schnaps, I think as you're now referring to him as, fits that profile, fits that description perfectly. And the sooner he leaves office, the better, in my view. So no love lost there at all. More debacles this week from the Department of Transport. More misspeakings, as the secretaries of state and ministers like to say. I misspoke. What you misled us, or you told a lie? Is that the alternative? I wish somebody would just really say, put their hand up and say, yeah, I actually ballsed that up. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Yeah. Humility, Chris, in a time like this would actually go down very well, I suspect, with industry and with the public. Of course, Grant Shapps has presided over many a debacle. This week, of course, he had the accommodation quarantine website go down I think an hour or two after it was launched, and it was just more and more bollocks from the Transport Secretary, as we've come to expect all this time. I think he's only marginally better than his predecessor, Christopher Grayling, who was an utter useless Secretary of State as well. So anyway, as I said, transport seems to be the one that gets the duds.
But that message was as popular as somebody passing wind in a crowded lift when you got another 30 floors to go. It was ridiculous,
I don't know. I mean, the good thing was the Prime Minister quickly pushed back on it at the press conference when asked, and I think that was helpful. I think it's good to see people, support the, have a little bit of faith in the system.
Yeah.
To be fair, there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's everything to be proud of now with the way the vaccination efforts are going. And exactly. I think, whilst we said last week, it still requires a collective, cohesive response and, from other countries to raise their game as well. What certainly helps us is, from domestic tourism side, there was no reason for him to say that. And of course, there was no policy decision in this case. But to say that you couldn't even book a holiday, let alone go, I think that was downright inflammatory when you are talking about hundreds of thousands of people that rely on aviation, aerospace, tourism businesses in our country, in the United Kingdom, and that clown comes out with something like that. Utterly despicable.
Yeah, plus to give people, do you know what I mean? It's part of those holiday bookings is doing your research and checking where you want to go and why and how and for how long and stuff, and actually booking it. and that also helps people know that there's.
I think that's part of the research. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, Chris. You'll remember this. Probably too. Is you used to be fascinated by picking up. You see what I did there? I didn't mention the age, Chris. I just simply said that.
Yeah, I know what you said. Yeah, as if like so long ago. Yeah, I'd have struggled.
I remember picking up books from Lund Poly as a kid, just walking past on the high street and walking into Lund Poly or into Thomas Cook as was, and picking up the brochures, which used to be ye thick. Yeah. And of course, there used to be lots of school kids like me that did this. And we used to go home and research and research and research. Never ended up going to those places, but it was really fun to kind of to do the research. And you get the atlas out and you'd start looking at things and building a bit of a picture or story around where you wanted to go, where you could possibly travel to, that your parents were never going to book in a month of Sundays. But that aside. And then they got wiser, of course, and these brochures were then sort of behind the counter. You had to ask. Whereas before, you just go and pick up a dozen off the thing and walk out with your satchel full of magazines and not a chemistry or physics book in sight. So I think part of that exists today, obviously in a very different manner. It's all done, all the research is done online, but actually a lot of, for a lot of businesses to actually predict demand.
Yes, exactly.
This is important because all of those hits, of course, and all that research that is done online and all of the page views, and my wife is a marketeer, so she knows this far better than me, and people will sort of curse my rudimentary view about this from a marketing or customer research perspective, but businesses rely on all of this data. And these hits and these views and where do want people to research and where do want to travel to actually then start to build a profile of how to rebuild the network and restore the network. So it's not just on forward bookings alone, it's actually on the research. So when Grant Sharp says that, actually people then say, oh, well, there's no point looking, darling, so let's use that time something else. So people then start to get deflated, they become negative again, they get back into that spiral that they were before, Chris, spiral of sort of descent and decline, which we just need some positivity out there, and it should be the government flying the flag for industry and for us all, not putting it down.
Yeah, and it's not that they should be making false promises or unrealistic target dates, but they need to bring the spirits of everybody up. People need to see positive things now, Steve. It's driving me mad now. Even on the television, certain people have got problems, which is everybody's got their own problems to a degree. It's important to know where to go to and how to get help, but not to keep emphasizing on the problems all the time. It's
well, to coin a phrase that was used by the UK chair of KPMG, who had to resign. I don't know if you saw that story.
Oh yeah.
Michael Brown, I think, or something. Bill Michael, sorry, Bill Michael. He had to resign after telling his employees on a web conference, these highly paid partners and highly paid professionals at KPMG, professional services and accounting firm, who still got bonuses and still paid out bonuses and all sorts. He had to tell them to stop whining, stop whinging, and actually realize how lucky you are. So yes, we accept we've all got problems, Chris. Obviously, some people to different degrees than others. And the poor chap said what many of us in the public would be thinking, and he had to resign because the video of the conversation was leaked. Now, maybe he also said that there's something that unconscious bias was a lot of bollocks. I think that's probably part of the problem. But I think people want to hear honesty, whether it's from business leaders like that gentleman who represents one of the top 4 consulting professional services firms, accounting firms in the world, in a very senior position. We want to hear honesty. What we don't want is sugarcoating, which is all we ever get from the press these days. So when people do say it as it is, and do say stop whining when you realize how good you've got it compared to many, many others. That's what we should always think, whether in our industry or outside of that. You see people struggling every day. It is sad that was the case.
Yeah, it is. It's about getting it into perspective, and also the people who really, really, really suffer are not the ones who can get themselves in front of a camera or onto a show or whatever to actually complain about it. And
that's right.
That's why it's anyhow, it's disproportionate, and there needs to be more positivity. I agree with you. Back to positive stuff. The vaccine, Steve, they're going great. I mean, everywhere now is starting to show some some solid improvements. The logistics, the industry, the supply chain, been fantastic with what they've been doing. So, you know, they've proven that there's not a major issue with it, and long may it continue. But EY, first airline for all their pilots to be vaccinated.
Well, yeah, good for them. I mean, 50% of the population of the United Arab Emirates has had a vaccine. So, I mean, leading the pack still at the top is Israel, 71%, which I think is phenomenal. 49% for the UAE, the UK at 21%. Down, you know, languishing at the bottom is Germany at 4%, Turkey at 3%. I mean, and then everything else kind of, you know, falls off a cliff after that. But really, as I said before, I'm skeptical, Chris, about whether the private sector should be having vaccines. We can see that so specifically the UAE, you know, 49 out of 100 of the population have been vaccinated, but the 51% have not. Now, are those 51% in the very low risk groups? Are those the children who we know, you know, from WHO stats, it's very low risk, or people in my age group maybe, and my priority group for vaccination, which is the below 40 group? We, you know, it could.
That's 2 out of 2, Steve. 2 out of 2. I don't think you want to go for your hat trick, son. You might be the Dorian Gray of the consultancy business, but you're not that young.
I'm teasing, but that is the group that I mean. But sorry, see this point, Chris. I still do think there is something to be said about you know, wealthy populations, wealthy countries. So wealthy countries in terms of, you know, sort of, you know, UAE pushing its private sector agenda before the population is vaccinated. The same thing applies to Singapore. So Singapore has 55,000 aviation workers vaccinated that they're very proud of. So EY, EK, SIA, I think I've got the first flight crew this week scheduled to operate together or has operated. 33,000 of those in Singapore are frontline workers. But you know, Singapore is languishing down at the very bottom when it comes to the rest of the population. Maybe they've taken a view that they're vaccinating the high-profile groups to try and restart their travel industry. That we know that Singapore, relies on that Changi hub particularly. So look, not being overly critical of different strategies in different countries. What I would say is that you know, I still personally believe that that the right thing to do is make sure the most vulnerable in society are vaccinated. And when I look at the map that was produced by The Economist last week, which showed that, and the headline was "Vaccine Nationalism Means Poor Countries Will Be Left Behind." Yeah. Now, this is something that the WHO and the COVAX program was supposed to stand up against and support. So when you look at the UK, who's ordered 410 million vaccines for a population of just less than 70 million, we already know. Now we need 150. Let's assume. And there might be some more vaccines required next year. But the UK has committed, still is the highest donor in the COVAX program by a country mile. I think 40% of the funding, 30% of the funding in COVAX is from the UK, and they will also donate the ordered vaccines. So when I look at countries like or continents like Africa, so every country bar South Africa, Morocco, Egypt, and Tunisia will not be vaccinated until 2023. Indonesia not vaccinated until 2023. Vietnam, Philippines not until 2023. Japan not until mid-22. And even, you know, rest of you know, places like Canada, South America, Russia, Australia not until 2022 to any meaningful levels. So The Economist did a great piece on that, Chris. So I do think this haves and have-nots. So all very well, you know, most of Europe being done by 2021, but Europe is an international, you know, largely for an aviation perspective, international market, but has operated historically because of Schengen. Although extra Schengen to an extent, still countries that are not in Schengen, but Europe as a continent, particularly because of Schengen, has operated essentially as a domestic market. But when you look at this aspect, you know, it's been every man for himself, really, when it comes down to European vaccine supply. We know the European Union and the Commission has failed miserably, despite their best efforts at saying, you know, all together and we're all in this together. And you know, small countries won't lead in the vaccine race. You need us here with the supply chain and the power to support you. Well, look at likes of Israel and the UAE and the UK that have done it without the European Union behind them.
I know.
The point of that is, Chris,
yeah.
that the European travel has actually really turned now into an international market, whereas it was, in my view, very much operating akin to the domestic market before. We've seen 75% traffic reduction on 2019 this last week. We've seen 55% of the fleet idle. I mean, aircraft are idle. You compare that to the likes of Indonesia, China, some of the top markets in the world now. The UK used to be the fourth largest in that list, and now it's sort of languishing down at the bottom there. But domestic markets where you've got large countries where in Europe, remember, you can still travel a lot by rail, you can still travel by road. So when borders do open, a lot of that travel might well shift in the short term, or has shifted in the short term. In Asia, that's not really possible, Chris. It's a bit awkward to it's a bit awkward to drive from Kuala Lumpur to Kuching, for example, which is in Borneo. It's a bit awkward to drive in the Philippines, even Japan. So I do think countries with large domestic markets will recover more quickly, and that's going to be a problem for Europe now as we go back into the sort of the vaccines taking good effect. But we're still going to wait for that ripple effect to happen across the rest of the markets that we want to sort of get into and enter. So anyway, look, good news in terms of vaccines rolling out. Good news in terms of taking hold to a decent level. But the bad news is I can't see still that this has a meaningful impact until we've got these rest of the populace to a meaningful level vaccinated themselves. Yeah, at the other end.
Yeah, no, I think I totally agree with you there. What you're talking about with the domestic markets and the way things are going to shift, it's amazing. But also, what's amazing, Steve, is that if you look at the way the cargo business now, the amount of emphasis that people are putting on it and the reliance on it, I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. And when you think now, in what, less than a year, there's been over 2,000 planes, passenger planes used, for cargo, and 250 to 300 completely with seats taken out, even brand new aircraft, so that amount of change and reliance and cash flow for airports, for airlines has been incredible shift. So I think cargo is going to stay at the forefront of everybody's business mix, for at least the next 5 to 10 years.
Oh, I think so. I think for sure. I mean, I think there's an awful lot of potential and opportunity still that probably remains untapped, Chris. I still think we've got this shifting dynamics now about moving more to we've seen passenger demand fall through the floor, and then we've therefore seen freighters pick up again. We've seen the freighters involved. We've now got the pharma, so the vaccine race on globally to distribute all these vaccines across the world. We are still seeing real penetration in Europe for vaccines and North America. And India, who's I think a massive vaccine producer. I think the largest vaccine producer in the world is an Indian firm, actually. I read this week. Somebody will probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that this week. And so what I think that means, Chris, is that the cargo capacity that was sort of destined for, we thought before, sort of hypothesized that we better start prioritizing pharma and prioritizing over gen cargo or other cargo that was being flown before. I don't think we're seeing that to the same extent now. Probably you know that better than I, but I still think there is growth in demand in all sectors, not just in the pharma space where we're seeing other space forsaken to prioritize pharma. I've seen this week. I've seen some of the big logistics firms are turning to picking up their own aircraft. And so is it CMA, Chris, the French mob, who I normally see on container ships or on reefers, or the brand on a reefer, a sea reefer, or a 40-foot container. They're going ahead with 2 A330 freighters themselves directly.
Yep. And I think a lot of that's going to happen, Stephen. Something that's not directly related, but something that happened yesterday. I was talking with my neighbour. We're having to put some new fences up, and some of the fencing is in short supply because they're not getting the shipments from Sweden.
Oh, because of the timber.
Yeah, and they don't no means of getting it across. And so now what is available, prices are going up, and there's limited supply.
Well, I'll get stuck in Felixstowe for weeks on end because of Brexit regulations, probably as well.
That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. What's going on now? All this, backdoor retaliation and complexity, and it just makes it an absolute mockery. Something else now, Steve. Just wanted to ask you. All right, just this week now, you've got a rocket. You've got one rocket going around Mars, one landing on it, and another one approaching it. I mean, it's a busy period, which is all to do with the positioning of the planets and the Earth and everything once every 2 years, which I understand. What do you think about that now? You've got one rocket from the UAE, another rocket from India, and you've got all this going on, on our poor little planet. What are your thoughts on that?
I haven't given it much thought before.
If you could just put it, keep the words tidy and clean.
I haven't given it much thought before. I'm not really into space. It's not an area that interests me a great deal. I'm much more interested in the ocean at the other end of the spectrum, or other end of the polar opposite, if you like. I haven't given it much thought, Chris. So I can't talk credibly on it. The only thing I would say is let's keep bilaterals and a few regulation areas possible, because normally when governments get involved in bilateral air service agreements get involved, things start to get difficult. So if it works just now and there's nothing crashed into each other, I'd probably leave it alone, I suspect.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about, it's the effort and it's just something I just wanted to get your point on. You've normally got something to say on lots.
I've said something, but it might not be as profound as I would normally be able to respond to other matters of state or matters of aviation.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, the digital development has also sped up. So probably now in the last year, between digitisation and between collaboration and people actually doing things together, what we've managed to fit into 1 year is probably 10 years normal worth, with all the naysayers and the blockers and the people who just put administrative barriers up. So that's very, very good. Looking forward to the future, huh?
Well, it is. I think I saw a case this week, however, of when things go horribly wrong. There's those videos that you often see that when things go wrong, or it's like sort of like a Jeremy Beadle type moment, or what was it, Dennis Norden? It'll be all right on the night.
That's
and there was a legal case being held. I think it was in the US this week, and the judge had to stop the defense lawyer
with the cat.
When he was a cat on the Zoom screen. And I just thought, well, look, you couldn't make that up. But I don't know now if people are becoming wise to this, because only a day later there was a senator, a US senator, who was part of a committee hearing, who was upside down now on his Zoom call with the rest of the Senate. So I think there's opportunity for a little bit of shall we say, taking the Michael when it comes to these type of things. As we saw in the early days of Zoom, people just so happen to be naked walking past in the background, or take their laptop into the shower. I mean, just pathetic, childish nonsense. I think we're seeing people clutching at straws, looking for alternative ways to make people smile. I'm not sure that doing it in the Senate or doing it in a courtroom is a way of making somebody smile. But look, if it gave him his 5 minutes of fame, very good. I would like to go back to actually normality, in sense of let's get some. I think the digital advances have been great. I can see, whether it's Zoom or Teams or presentations, being pushed through the digital sphere. It's great, Chris. In fact, I did a piece of work this week with a client workshop with an airport client, and the facilitator was using if you like, sort of often we do this sort of breakout sessions and workshops and stick post-its on the wall and group things in verticals, and and this all happened on my screen, and I could move the post-it around, I could fill the post-it in, and I could change the color of the post-it of the pen. It was the first time I did that, and it was really good. But actually what we realized afterwards was it's the little conversations around the part of the wall that's got the most people.
Yes.
Where you have the conversation and where the brainstorming happens. It's the little conversations after you sit back down at the table. They kind of go, oh, what was that one up there? Did you pop that there?
Yeah.
Whilst the other people are still walking the room, maybe. That doesn't happen in the same digital way. So I do think, whilst we've gone on, leaps and bounds, I still think there's absolutely a place for this. I saw it this week. Maybe our listeners or viewers outside of Australia won't know this company, but certainly Aussies will. A company called Wesfarmers. Wesfarmers is a ownership vehicle of many different Australian retail brands, including so recently Coles supermarkets, which you might know, Bunnings Warehouse, and so on and so forth. Anyway, the guy, the CEO at Wesfarmers was saying that whilst digital, to sort of paraphrase you, Chris, as digital's served them well, there will absolutely be the need to get back into sort of a normal environment where people meeting together, talking together. For I think the reasons I just said is that one, we like human contact and people like being with people. I suspect some people like myself like being with people more than others. Not sure people like being with me, but I enjoy being with people because I like to engage. But I think there's a lot of people in my circumstances that would like to re-engage again on a personal level, and there are others that would say, actually, this really works for me, works for my lifestyle, works for my children, works for my, and fair play to them. So if I think there'll be a sort of balance. People, this pent up demand that we've seen, for leisure travel being suppressed, it will be released. I think the same thing will happen for business travel, Chris. A slower release, but I suspect it'll probably plateau and it'll change a little bit. Demand will change before, and that's going to be a big problem going forward for the carriers that have been used to the pointy end, subsidizing a lot of the economy fares and the travel at the back end of the airplane. Thinking the likes of British Airways, American, Delta, Lufthansa, all of the large hub carriers, JAL, Qantas as well, who relied on premium fares, from the corporates and business to subsidize the cheap fares down the back for you and me to go on holiday. Although
did you say you down the back, Steve?
I did. I was
you got the hat trick in. Yeah, you got the hat trick in.
Yeah.
There's a man, anything in double figures he doesn't want to go to. But I agree with you. I agree with you there with regards to the with the technology. But I do think when it does come back, yes, people will want to do it. But all the benefits of what's happened, you put it all together, everything's going to be a lot more efficient. But it does need both sides of the coin. Now, another thing, Steve, right? So everybody like this build back, bring back, or bounce back. There's definitely going to be a bounce back. There's definitely going to be the need to bring back better. In some cases, yes, build back better. But when it does happen, one of the things that's going to be a big challenge now is where to get the people from and the people who've got the experience to deal with that bounce back, because everybody's had to offset a lot of people because of practical sizing, and cash flow is important. And there's figures that, I don't know, between 25 and 30 carriers around the world have gone to the wall, and there's another couple. Air Namibia now has just announced that they're suspending business, so there's going to be some more fallout. But when it does come back, where are these people who are trained, qualified, and not under such stress and anxieties? Where are they going to come from to take up the slack?
Well, interesting point, Chris, and it reminds me, it sort of touches on something I saw this week, which was the industrial relations strategies of a lot of these companies has not kept pace with the change in demand, or the continued suppression of demand, the changing regulations, also the changing government positions on things like furlough. So the taxpayer paying for, because the government doesn't pay, just to remind everybody, the taxpayer pays. The taxpayer funding, those that are sadly out of work, where there is no work because of lack of demand. And a lot of that stuff is being pulled away, or being stopped, or being suspended, or reduced in the same form that it might have been there 12 months ago. And that's completely understandable, because the bills just keep going on and on and on and on and on. It's all right. Socialist agenda dictates that you spend the money until it runs out, but that's not a particularly wise proposition for the most part. So I do think that companies have to give this a lot of thought, Chris. And you and I have spoken about this in the week, and with our own internal conversations about people and seeking people. And I don't think these people disappear, Chris. I think the people are there. I think what there has to be is there has to be a kind of a cohesive, clear, coordinated structure around, at what point you bring people back, how do you keep them retained, how do you bring them back, how do you get them trained and certified, and how do you get them validated back to the line. I think all of that, a lot of companies, it exists already, particularly those that are in flying roles or licensed roles like engineers, etc., pilots and engineers in particular. I think the challenge is more so, Chris, at the if I dare say, at the sort of the blue collar worker level, for want of a better term, but the guys that do the hard graft, whether it be in the terminals or be on the ramp, and those chaps who really are the unsung heroes of our business and have been for forever.
Yeah.
And I think there's a changing dynamic there. It reminds you of what struck me in the week was your old stomping ground in Madrid at a place that you know and love well, at Barajas. At Barajas Airport this week, they announced that Ground Force, 1,000 employees, are going on strike. Now, these are permanent employees of Ground Force. For those not aware, Ground Force is a large ground handler in Spain, and they happen to be headquartered, I believe, in Madrid, as well as the operational team in Madrid for ground handling. And they're going on strike, and they've announced industrial action. Now, one would say, well, that's a bit bloody weird. Why on earth would you be now announcing industrial action at a time like this? Oh, nice. Well, let me tell you, it's because Ground Force are employing temporary workers in place of their permanent employees who are at home on furlough, the Spanish equivalent. I don't know if it fully exists, but whatever the Spanish equivalent of the furlough scheme is, they're stood down, if you like. They're still employees of Ground Force, but there's no work for them. So they're stood down from duties. Ground Force have had obviously some work pick up, might be in cargo, might be some passenger restarting, might be some domestic Spanish capacity or customer restarting. They've employed temporary workers to do the job of those permanent employees that are sitting at home stood down.
Getting paid.
Getting paid. Now, I have to say, well, I don't know if they're getting paid. They're getting paid possibly by the taxpayer, potentially not by the employer. So I suspect the Spanish taxpayer has a gripe. Anybody that sends money to the hacienda, Chris and I would know well as well. That would be a problem for the Spanish taxpayer. The second thing is, I completely, now without knowing the detail, from the detail I've read and understand, I completely sympathise with those workers, because how dare an employer employ temporary workers? Now, I don't know the whole situation. Somebody from Ground Force might be listening, and please feel free to get in touch with us if you want to have the conversation. But I do think, Chris, that this has been really a poorly thought out strategy, if it is the case that temporary workers are being employed to replace permanent workers who are still on the payroll. Yeah. So to answer your question, I think there is some really well thought out process and practice in place by business that have got it down pat, and there's some really pathetic efforts like this from Ground Force. It just says, you guys have got this wrong. I mean, how valuable does an employee now feel when they see somebody else probably being paid less than them to do the same job that they're doing when they're sitting at home, not at work? Yeah. I think that is disgraceful. So to finish, I think there are lessons to be learned in many quarters. But I think the key thing is engage with your trade unions, engage with your workforce, be honest and be upfront. People accept that there might not be the work there, but what they don't accept is when you try to pull a fast one on them and you screw them to the benefit of somebody else.
Yeah, and even doing some sort of a compromise with whatever scheme is there, because one of the influencing factors could be there that it's a very short spike in demand for work, and then if they take people back, and then they got to put them back off again. But there's a much better way of having a logical, engage, logical argument, and do something that's good for everybody instead of trying to do a short.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah. I think everybody's going to have to really start to focus on this, Steve. They can't just sit back and be worrying. I mean, of course they can, because cash flow is what's keeping everybody going at the moment. But there are certain things like leaving all of the regulatory training right to the very last minute. There's things where, people who are being forced into positions now where they haven't been trained or supported or given, it's because of the crisis and because of other people leaving. people need some different types of help now. And it's not about bombarding the markets with training and making people feel that the more training you have, the better chance you've got to get back into work.
I've seen a lot of that this week. I've seen email after email from a number of different quarters that offering €100 for this training or €200 for that training, or we'll do this free training. And I mean, to give people, the employees who are in a vulnerable position right now, to give them any degree of hope that this will help, claw them back into work, or help cover some of the gaps that they've missed in the last almost 12 months now, Chris, since this whole debacle started, is really misleading, and I think poor form.
Yeah, no, I agree, 100%. Now, another development, shall we say, or something that that everybody needs to be mindful of, is you've seen that incident now with the Airbus 320 flyer deal, where it was hit by a drone attack, and the damage that was caused to the aircraft afterwards. Now, that's a terrible thing, Steve. Don't get me wrong, I'm not getting involved in the whys or the politics or the local disagreements or whatever, but the fact that it was a drone, because all the things that have happened in the past, and certain rules and guidelines and everything, the fact that a drone can do that, people are going to have to start thinking out of the back of their head's eye what could happen and what could go wrong.
Firstly, look, Flyer Deal has been a customer of ours, and I know the team there well, and Con and Mike and Roy and Sudeep and all the guys there are great lads. And I spoke to one of them in the week, and said, it never rains, but it pours.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't believe how shit my day was the response I got back from one of the lads.
Yeah.
And I say that, I'm not saying that sort of, I'm not laughing because it's humorous. I'm saying it because, going through COVID is one thing. I mean, but to have a shrapnel damage or damage to an aircraft from a drone induced, was it a small rocket or something, Chris? I mean, something like that of that nature. In Abha is just phenomenal. I saw the photographs. It just I mean, very, very lucky. I mean, very, very lucky where it hit the rear fuselage. Had it punctured a wing, it could have been quite different for obvious reasons. But nobody was killed, I understand, thankfully, but there's quite substantial damage to the skin, the tail on the aircraft. I mean, nobody could have thought of that. But I mean, what I do know, Chris, also is, and you've lived in Saudi as have I, is they have got fantastic anti-missile systems.
Yeah.
They regularly blow things out of the sky without most people knowing. But if you live there, and it happens on a I wouldn't say a regular, semi-regular basis. It shouldn't happen, but it does. And that's mostly these Houthis who are just sort of trying their luck, throwing rockets. So this one obviously could have been a lot worse. So thank God, and please God it wasn't. But I mean, this is now something that will, of course, mass pandemic has entered the words of every business resilience and crisis management consultant the world over the last 12 months. The next one will be rocket attacks from drones. I mean, just good Lord.
Yep, and cyber security. People are, they've got band-aids over their security on their systems and their data, and that's going to be another big thing. My God,
British Airways are the world's experts at having porous data security for the passengers and GDPR data.
Yeah, but it's crazy. It's terrible, isn't it? Absolutely terrible. Now, Steve, something else that I was looking at, and just want to get your opinion on it. In Paris, okay, so they were talking about developing the airport, putting another terminal up and everything, and now they've scrapped it, and mainly because of fighting climate change. But one of the issues that came out of there as well is that they're thinking of bringing a guideline or a rule in that if there's a rail link, you don't get a flight link.
Well, this is Charles de Gaulle Terminal 4.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
suspect you're talking about. Yeah, this has been in the pipeline for some time. It was to consolidate Air France operations in one sort of super terminal akin to Terminal 5 at Heathrow or a Starlines T2, etc. That was kind of the ideology behind Terminal 4 Charles de Gaulle. I don't know if it is the environmental lobby or it's just frankly a reflection on Air France's view of the world going forward now. As a hub carrier, of course, their business has suffered massively. When we restart travel, it'll be leisure-dominated European traffic. As I said before, on the continent, rail is fantastic. I personally love traveling by rail on the continent. I used to always use Eurostar rather than flight when I was traveling to Paris or Brussels. In fact, a year ago, I used one of the first Eurostars to Amsterdam from London. That was delightful. Far more civilized than flying. Far more civilized. Although that's it, I use EasyJet or Ryanair mostly around Europe. So there are other more civilized ways to fly for flying long haul. But look, I say that kind of tongue in cheek. I don't think that's a bad thing, Chris. I mean, the environmental lobby in Europe has strong voice. The environmentalists have a strong voice. We should listen to them. If there are trains available. I mean, I never fly to Scotland, for example, from London. I always take the train. I'll tend to fly up in the morning and I'll take the sleeper train back at night. Say, the sleeper train? What the hell are you doing? I said, well, I can sleep and it might be a little bit more expensive than flying on that occasion, but actually it's good use of my time. I don't have to get up at crack of sparrows again, and I can save an hotel in Edinburgh, which is a bloody expensive city for hotels. Anybody knows? My mother, if she's listening, would say, well, you could stay with me, but thanks, Mum, but no, you're all right. I'll stick to the Balmoral Hotel. Chris, I think there's nothing wrong with this at all. I think taking a good hard look at this based on the traffic recovery being pushed out 2023, 2024, some believe beyond. For a carrier like Air France, take a long time to get back to the numbers they were once at. So maybe they just kick the can down the road. But of course, I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. I do think that though, whilst money is cheap, cash has never been cheaper. I mean, it is. I mean, that's thank God it is cheap at the minute. I mean, it was cheap before we went into this crisis. And that I think that is a saving grace for many people. Liquidity has been shored up because debt is cheap. If debt were more expensive at the minute, I think it would be a problem. I lost track of what I was going to say there. But I was going to say So with infrastructure funds, they're still looking to snap up some opportunities. I think there'll still be some large infrastructure investments and privatization, etc. I think so. I think now is if they are building and traffic is forecast to come back in 2, 3, 4 years time, I don't see why dependent on the size of the investment, who's funding it, it's a problem. When it's a French taxpayer that's funding it, however, I think that is a problem. And it was a French taxpayer funded development for Charles de Gaulle. ADP, as everybody knows, is a state-owned entity. So no, there. Now, if that was the work happening, for example, Gatwick, or in the UK or in private airports, I think there'd be a different position, Chris, potentially, despite the despite the environmental argument.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. But
interesting on that, I saw Leeds Bradford had their expansion plans approved this week. So good on them.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I do think there's going to be an awful lot more focus now, not just on the sustainability of the business, but sustainability of the planet as well. And people are going to want to work for companies that are doing the right things, and people are going to want to work for people that care and companies that care. And I think that's going to be definitely a big thing when it comes back. Now, nice little segue there to EasyJet. You mentioned EasyJet, but it's also good and to end on a positive note. The EasyJet are also looking now to expand, and they're looking at domestic stations, and they're looking at the way they feel the markets are going to change. And
they have. I saw a flurry of activity, not a flurry of snow. There's been a lot of that in the UK this week, but a flurry of market announcements and network expansion from EasyJet, connecting some regional ports. I say regional, I mean sort of semi-regional, Bristol, Manchester, Belfast, to places like down the southwest. Beautiful part of the world. I love to go. Is Cornwall.
Beautiful.
And also connecting them to places like Bulgaria, Egypt, Cyprus, Turkey. So and all slated for May, June 2021. So watch this space. Ryanair announced a winter program, 700 routes on offer for winter 21 from Ryanair. 700 routes.
Yeah.
Goodness, when I first started in aviation, Chris, Ryanair was still operating the 737-200s. When you started, they probably operating the Bandeirante, or I don't know, they might not even have existed at that stage. But I don't know what you call 4. It's not a hat trick, obviously, because that's 3. So what?
Yeah. What do you call 4? Pain in the arse, mate.
Anyway, sorry. I love to pull your leg, Chris, especially on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, the old man.
So good on EasyJet getting some of that. Some positive announcements. Not massive frequency. 1, 2, 3 a week sort of numbers, but markets that they haven't operated before, they're sort of trying their luck. Maybe they're seeing some interest there from their own sort of customer sentiments. The likes are good on them.
Yeah. And just to finish now, obviously you get winners and losers in every battle, every war, every crisis, every situation. But one of the areas that's done so well, Anchorage, and it's one of the nicest places I've ever been to in my life, and it's somewhere that I'm definitely going to go back to because of how nice it is. But the airport director, Jim Seisnick, we've had him on a podcast, and he was talking about what was happening right at the very beginning. But they've had incredible figures, and because of their location and also feeding into North America, but also South America, they've done so well. But for next week, Steve, something I want to talk about is the US. Okay, so we're talking about investment and facilities and when you look at some of the incredible almost destination hubs around the world, okay, the US falls way behind with regards to the type of terminals, the capabilities, etc. There's an awful lot of refurbishment or renewal or rebuild that's necessary in so many of those hubs.
It's a joke. The US is so antiquated when it comes to airports. Part of that is majority of airports, Chris, in the US are owned by the city councils.
Yeah.
So they fall under the purview of the city managers and city management. The other thing is that that most of the gates are leased by carriers, so they lock up capacity based on their own demands and their own right. There's very few common user domestic terminals in the US, except potentially for the really small kind of airports serving small and regional communities. But all of the hub cities and all of the primary gateways are antiquated. Reminds me of the only airport in the world that I regularly see carpet is Changi for some bizarre reason. It's a pain in the backside to pull your trolley bag. Quite why they've gone down that path, I don't know. But I suspect that the designer, the architects, must have gone to the US because that's the only other place in the world.
I've got to say, you carpets everywhere there. Yeah.
So bizarre, antiquated, needs a good kick at the backside for investment. I suspect that won't happen anytime soon. There seem to be cities are holding on to their airports for some reason. Maybe rightly so. Maybe they're doing something right. We did say before, we spoke before in a previous episode that airports are public infrastructure, despite the ownership question. They are public infrastructure. They serve a purpose of the strategic infrastructure nature. Maybe there's something to be said for that. But whilst I think the US is still in the gripes of this crisis and pandemic and all the fund, I mean the numbers there, the just public funds are just another world. I can't see that changing anytime soon. So.
Yeah, no, it's big banks is a good opportunity now to do something and change it for when it comes back, especially the size of the domestic market. I was talking to a guy and he was saying that I can't remember now, but it's something like 17 or 19 million people, just on one special day in the States, were flying, and it was incredible. Now, to fully finish on something positive, last week and for the last, almost 2 weeks, there's been certain announcements coming out about last year, negative about everything, but the journalists, the professionals in our business who put so much time and effort into following up on the stories and the accuracy of the stories and the interest of the stories, they do an absolutely incredible job. And they all, almost all unanimously were saying that you know, it's not right to be negative when cargo has done so well, etc., etc. And they did a great job. And I think it's just nice to give a shout out to the professional journalists out there who keep our industry image, keep our industry data and information, you know, updated and distributed so well. So there's a couple of people that we mentioned was Alex from Lodestar, Thelma from Air Cargo Eye, Reggie John from Stat Times, Gavin Murray from Murray Media, and our own Will Waters. Great job, guys. You know, well done to everybody. And to everybody that's still pumping it away and on the front line, as always, a lot of respect. So well done. And to you, Stevie boy, good luck with the rugby. Cricket again next week. And I'm looking forward to whatever emblems, symbols and badges you'll be able to dig out for next week. It's a real eclectic mix there.
Well, thanks, Chris. Yep, as ever, good discussion. This like to also wish everybody that celebrates the Happy Lunar New Year or Happy Chinese New Year. Gong Ti Fat Cai, Gong Hei Fat Joy. And as we enter this year of the ox, good luck, and may this be a better year than the previous.
Well, if it is the year of the ox, the hard worker, the tough worker, hopefully it will reap its rewards this year.
I think there's many a tough worker that we've seen shine through in 2020, Chris. People that ordinarily may not have fallen them into that bracket, but for whatever reason, to keep their heads above the water, keep the family food on the table, and keep themselves well nourished and professionally, intellectually nourished as well. I think probably many that listen to this podcast, the half a dozen that do, can count themselves in that hard worker bracket for sure.
Yeah, no, good luck to everybody, and please God, it'll be better for everybody now every month that passes. So, all right, lovely boy. See you next week. All the best. Really appreciate it.
Chris.
As always, enjoy the feedback. Thanks.
Cheers. See you.